Hey, everybody, it's Carson Cordy, the Champaign sports anchor for Fox, Illinois. And even though the Illinois basketball season ended a couple weeks ago, Brad Underwood, he's still busy building a roster for next season. And that's the way it goes in college basketball. It seemed like after the NCAA tournament, the big message was retention. Let's bring everybody back and run it back next year. Let's bring back Trey White, DGL, Ben Hummerkaus, Merez Johnson, Thomas Ivicic. Newsflash in college basketball, there's no such thing as retention for 99% of programs. I'll get to the people who are leaving real quick, but I want to start on a positive note. Here's who's returning for Illinois next year, confirmed. Illinois got a big bonus. Kylan Boswell, who's going to be a senior next year and a point guard, he's coming back to Illinois. This was the guy that transferred into Arizona. He's a Champaign native, and he played his best basketball over the last month of the year. Last 10 games, averaging 17 points per game. Less turnovers, more assists. And what we saw from Boswell is that he regained his status as one of the best on-ball defenders in college basketball. We saw in early November, when he shut down Mark Sears of the Alabama Crimson Tide, who was an All-American. We saw him play really well against Tennessee. But you saw in the middle of the year, Boswell wasn't playing as well. He came off the bench. One of the games, he got benched by Brad Underwood. He wasn't making shots. The defense wasn't as strong. But Boswell really changed the narrative to end the year. More layups inside, less three-point shooting, and just phenomenal defensive games against a 7-foot center of Michigan, Danny Wolf. 6'1" guy covering a 7-foot guy. Did really well against Cooper Flagg at Duke, holding him to a pedestrian 15 points. Did really good against Iowa, who's a high-scoring team. So Boswell is going to be the alpha next year. This is his team. He's the leader. And when he can bring back a veteran point guard, you're going to be good. I think what Boswell struggled with was maybe a role at the beginning of the year. Maybe he was a little too not assertive enough and let KJ, Kasper Siakachonis, run the offense. I think this is Boswell's offense next year, and I think he's going to do a pretty good job. Another guy that Illinois brought back, which is huge, is Thomas Ivicic. He's going to be a junior next year. This is the 7'1" center who can knock down a three-point shot. He finished the year with 13 points per game, around 7 rebounds. And you saw, when Tommy didn't play, Illinois lost. And Ivicic dealt with a lot of external factors. Strep, mono, rolled ankle, the flu. He missed a lot of games for Illinois, and they lost him. Michigan State, he had strep throat. They lost. Maryland, he didn't play that game. They lost. Ivicic, there's rumors that he was going to test the NBA waters because this guy is a projected second-round pick. And this is what the NBA kind of likes to see. Those big centers who can stretch the floor and shoot a three-point shot. But my guess is Illinois is going to pay him really well, and he's going to have a really big role for Illinois next year. A lot of the offense runs through Tommy. And the best part about bringing back Tommy, they just got his twin brother, Zavamir, from Arkansas, who's transferring to the Illinois program. This one's kind of slam dunk to get him. Zavamir is an inch taller at 7'2". He also shoots 40% from the three-point shot. But yeah, no doubt, I think Ivicic is actually better. Thomas Ivicic, he's been way more productive in college than Zavamir, his brother from Arkansas. But I think what Zavamir brings is good minutes off the bench. He's a guy that can play 20, 25, 20 minutes a game and really play that 4 spot. And Brad Underwood, he loves to shoot the three-point shot, and I think Zavamir is going to fit a perfect role doing that. Another guy that Illinois brought back, and kind of surprising, is Ty Rodgers. Ty Rodgers is a guy that actually redshirted last year because there's probably speculation he wasn't going to play that much because Brad was, big into three-point shooting and, scoring a lot and stretching the floor, and that's just not what Ty Rodgers does. Ty Rodgers is a dunker. He's a rebounder. He's a good defender. Most importantly, this guy's a good leader. Every year when Illinois goes to Big Ten Media Days, they bring some Illinois representatives, the players. Ty Rodgers was there last year before his red shirt because he's respected. He started every game on that Elite 8 team. So I think with a couple guys leaving the program, which we'll get to soon, Ty Rodgers saw that he was going to get playing time again. And this is a guy with 2 years of eligibility. I think this is a slam dunk to bring Ty Rodgers back. And when he played, he was around 7 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and he was a really good offensive rebounder. And I think Illinois, who struggled the last 2 years significantly with defense, let's be real, I think Ty Rodgers is going to be a shot in the arm. Now to the bad news. Who's Illinois losing? First off, we'll start with Trey White. Uh, Trey White's going to Kansas. It's gonna be his fourth school in 4 years. I would talk to Trey, during these post-game press conferences, and he would always be like, "Yeah, love Brad, love the coaching style. Can't wait to come back and run it back next year." Said he had the energy to do it. And then, a few days later, he's entering the transfer portal. And I think he's replaceable, but I'll tip my hat. The guy was a damn good basketball player to end the season. Last 7, 8, 10 games or so, I mean, he was scoring 15 points per game. He was a good dunker. He started making those corner 3-point shots. It's a blow to lose him for sure. Illinois is going to have to find another another guy at the 3 or 4 position who can stretch the floor, from the 3-point line. The guy they lose is DGL, Trey Gibbs Longhorn. Guy was an absolute spark plug. He was a great energy guy. Brad Underwood respected him. He was feisty in the locker room. There was a stretch where DGL, it seemed like he was going to overtake Kylan Boswell's spot as a guard, to be honest with you. But, DGL, after he had the flu, he never really regained that mojo. He got sat on the bench. And the last 7 games, DGL didn't score. And I think one thing to add with DGL and Boswell, there's a lot of people that were team DGL over Boswell. Offensively, like I can see an argument, like DGL was an absolute slasher and super confident, but I think the defenses don't really compare. Even though they're both around, that 6'1", 6'2" range, Boswell seemed a lot stronger and could guard bigger, versatile players. Like DGL cannot guard Cooper Flagg. DGL cannot guard Danny Wolf, the 7-foot center from Michigan. I wouldn't trust DGL to shut down Mark Sears, who was an All-American for Alabama. What DGL brings is pretty freaking special. The way that he can play that on-ball defense. And that's something that, in my humble opinion, Illinois needs to really hone in next year. Because you saw, like in games, you score a lot against Maryland, but, you give up 95 points. Or, Wisconsin, you gave up 95 points. Duke, you gave up 110. Getting back a Ty Rodgers, Kylan Boswell duo, that's going to do wonders for the program. So I wish DGL the best of luck. He's a great guy. Just unfortunately, you probably saw he wasn't going to get as much playing time as he wants as a junior. So he's going to go to a different school and probably earn a role that he deserves, to be quite honest. Now, the big blow, the big shocker was Merez Johnson leaving for the Michigan Wolverines. That's a gut punch. And that's a guy that's not easy to replace. He's 6'10", 260 pounds, good rebounder, good defender, good dunker, scored 12 points per game. Before DGL broke his wrist, he was one of the best players on the team. He was an absolute fan favorite. What's weird about Merez is it's really shocking that he left. This is a guy that's from the Chicagoland suburbs. He's a guy that's been committed to Illinois since his sophomore year of high school. And as a freshman, he played a lot. I mean, not a lot of freshmen played 20 minutes. Like when Coleman Hawkins was here as a freshman, the center before Merez Johnson, he'd play around 5 minutes per game, but he stuck it out for 4 years. I mean, Merez was getting 20 minutes per game, and it just didn't work out, I guess. Every school wanted him. Michigan wanted him. Ohio State wanted him. Tennessee wanted him. Arkansas wanted him. I'm probably missing a lot of schools, but this guy was like one of the top players in the transfer portal, and Illinois is losing a key piece with him leaving. Another 2 guys that are leaving Illinois, most likely, I think Kaspers Yakachonis is gone. He's going to be a top 10 pick. I think he did a lot good for Illinois, obviously. This was an 18-year-old that would score 15 points per game and get 5 assists. But I also think, he was really young. He made a lot of mistakes, and he had a lot of plate. He had a lot of food on his plate, a lot to carry for this team. There was games where KJ would have 7 turnovers and no assists. There'd be games where KJ would probably shoot too many 3-point shots, and that really wasn't his game. I wish KJ the best of luck. He's really good. I just wish we had him when he was 21 years old, because when you're an 18-year-old and you have that much on your plate, sometimes you're going to falter. Like, imagine the difference between Ayo Dosunmu from an 18-year-old to a 20-year-old. We saw it. Ayo went from 11 points per game to 20 points per game, or Terrence Shannon went from 8 points at Texas Tech to 23 points per game his last year at Illinois as a fifth-year senior. Just unfortunately, in the NBA, they draft off potential. And they look at Kasper Yakachonis and they see those really good games against Indiana, or they see those really good games against Missouri, or all those game-winning shots he had, like against Purdue. And they're going to draft on potential, and he's gone. Brad Underwood said it best. Kasper's best days won't be with Illinois. They're going to be on an NBA team. And I wish him the best of luck. He's going to be drafted to probably a bad team that he's going to have to carry them. When you're a lottery pick, you're not playing for the Celtics. You're not playing for the 1990s Chicago Bulls. He's going to be stuck in Charlotte or New Orleans Pelicans, sometimes struggling franchises. I'm praying he gets drafted by a good team, and I hope everything works out. He was a great player. Thank you, KJ. And the one guy that everybody's interested in, what's going to happen with Will Riley? My gut, Will Riley's gone. That's another example of the NBA drafting off the potential. And, KJ was a freshman who was supposed to be in high school last year. He's from Canada. And, in the month of December and January, you would see NBA mock drafts and you would see Will Riley, projected first-round pick, and you would just be like, what are you guys watching? The guy can't, he wasn't making shots. He was 175 pounds. He was scoring 6 points per game. I'm like, that wasn't speaking my language, or a lot of people. So everyone was like, Will Riley, return one more year. You're going to be great. And when everybody thought that Will Riley would potentially take off as a sophomore, he actually did it as a freshman in the second half of the year. I mean, the last 13 games, he was better than Kasper Yakachonis. He was the best player on the team. And there were some big changes in that. Tip Brad Underwood's hat for developing this guy and the rest of the program and assistant coaches. He went from 175 pounds to 195 pounds. So he got bigger. He took less sloppy three-point shots, and he was attacking the rim and not afraid of contact. So he went from 6 points per game to 18 points per game. His defense really improved. He became a better passer. This guy went from less than 1 assist to 4 assists a game. There was times where he took away the point guard responsibilities from our point guard, Kasper Yakachonis. It was very exciting to see Will Riley's development. I'm always going to remember how good he was against Ohio State in February. That was his coming out party. Or how good he was against Purdue on senior day that clinched Illinois a top 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. Or how good he did in that round of 32 game against Xavier. They scored over 20 points and 18 of them in the second half. The guy became a national headline. So, long story short, I don't know too many players that say, you know what, don't want the first round pick, I'm going to come back to Illinois. It just doesn't happen. Will Riley will be testing his NBA chances. Now, of course, if for some reason he's awful in the NBA draft combine and he doesn't jump high and he plays bad and he drops to a second round pick, sure, he's got a home back in Champaign, and Illinois could offer him millions of dollars to come back. I don't know if you know this, but NIL is the thing that everybody's been talking about. How you play players, and that's donor driven. Well, now colleges can use revenue sharing, which can come directly from the university's pocket. So bottom line, there's a lot more money to go around for these college basketball players. Will Riley can make a couple million if he comes back. But my gut's telling me Riley's going to test well in the NBA combine. He's going to be a first-round pick. I think he's likely gone. We're looking at Illinois' roster. Boswell bring back's good. Ivasic is great. Rogers is great. Ivasic's twin brother Zavimir is great. But there's a lot of points to replace next year. It's not easy to replace 55 points per game. And that's the number when you lose KJ, Will Riley, DGL, Trey White, and Morez Johnson. So who's Illinois looking at this year? Who can they bring back? We're still waiting to hear from guys like Ben Hummerkaus. But bottom line, I think Illinois is expanding. Its horizons bigger. They're trying to be big players in the transfer portal. And we've been seeing that each year. However, we did get kind of bad news. Their top 2 targets, Josh Dix from the University of Iowa. He was a 3-point sharpshooter. He committed to Creighton. And then Jalen Sellers was another guard who scored 16 points per game at UCF. He's going to go to the Big East school, Providence. So Illinois went 0 for 2 right away. However, I would not freak out if you're an Illinois basketball fan. I really wouldn't. Because remember Terrence Shannon Jr.? Remember Matt Meyer? Those are transfer portal guys, and Illinois didn't get them till late May. So what Illinois is going to have to do is they're just going to have to wait the next couple months and wait for those guys who go to the NBA draft, test it out, but eventually come back to college. That's going to be Illinois' pot to take from. And Illinois is going to have plenty of money, the brand's going to be good enough cachet that they're probably going to be able to get a couple good players that we don't even know yet. And that's the thing. Like Will Riley last year, Illinois didn't get him until the summer. Kasper Giacochonis was late. We did not know who they were in March of last year. Do you follow Lithuanian basketball or Canadian basketball? No. That's the thing. Brad Underwood's staff is super connected internationally. And, they got a good reputation of now sending kids to the NBA. They're going to be able to get some good players. A couple guys that they are looking at, they just got a commitment from a European center, David Mirjevic. He's a 6'9" center, and he kind of plays similar to Thomas Ivicic. This is a guy that can shoot the 3-point shot. This is a guy that can, get a lot of assists and dump it down. Brad Underwood has definitely moved away from the Kofi Coburn model, the guy that's only good for dunking and, rebounding. I shouldn't say that because that's pretty much was Merez Johnson's bread and butter, but Merez was a little more athletic than Kofi. But, you see Merez is gone and, they replaced him with David right away from Europe. You're definitely seeing a model of Illinois. They want to shoot 30, 43-point shots, and that's what David's going to provide, likely off the bench as a freshman. But, if David stays 2-3 years, he's kind of the heir apparent, taking over for Thomas Ivicic once he finally leaves for the NBA. Another guy to look at for Illinois, I think, is Dame Sarr. This is an Italian shooting guard who's 6'5". He's getting looked at by a lot of schools, to be honest with you. It's been reported that Kansas and Duke are interested, but it does seem like Illinois is the front runner with him. He's from Italy, and he would probably play a little bit of that wing position. So he would be replacing what Trey White and Will Riley would do. You know what I mean? Like attack the floor, be athletic, attack the basket, pop it open 3-point shot. So we'll see about Sarr in the coming months, but those are the big names that I would look at for Illinois. So we're looking at a starting lineup. I think you're going to have, Boswell start at the point guard position. You're going to have Thomas Ivicic start at the center position. I think you could potentially see Ty Rodgers start at the 3 position. And then I think they're going to hit the transfer portal and try to get a veteran guard to play at that 2 position. We probably don't even know his name yet. And then they would probably like to play Dame Sarr at the 4 position if they end up getting that commitment. So some good guys off the bench. I mean, I think you're going to see Zavamir. I think you're going to see the twin brother of Tommy. And Zavamir is a guy who scored 8 points per game and shot 40% from the 3-point line. I think he's going to feel really comfortable here at Illinois with his brother and his former assistant coach, Orlando Antigua. And he's got a couple years of eligibility, which is really good. Another guy you could see off the bench is Jake Davis. That's a guy that played a lot of minutes with Brad Underwood. Brad Underwood loved his motor. He said he's a Pizza Hut guy that he wouldn't want to fight in the parking lot. And Davis was actually the second best 3-point shooter on the team, efficiency-wise. You didn't see a lot of volume, but maybe as another year in the program as a junior, maybe he goes from 3 points per game to 8 points per game. He's definitely a character that Brad Underwood likes and wants to stick around the program. But definitely, Illinois is going to have to, hit the transfer portal and still add on this roster. I hate to say it, just if you compare this past season's roster, potentially what we're seeing next year, right now, the safer bets to say was that Will Riley and Giacochonis team was probably more talented. You got 2 first-round NBA draft picks. You got Merez Johnson, who was a phenomenal center. Who was a phenomenal center as a freshman. You had a guy like Trey White who played 3 years of college basketball and was good for 10, 12 points per game. But I think that what could help Illinois is that, they're a year older this year, so you trust Boswell to be more consistent. You hope that Tommy's a little more consistent. You think that Ty Rodgers can provide good defensive prowess, coming back as a junior. And I think one thing with Illinois that affected them this year, and hopefully it doesn't affect them as much next year, is the flu bug and the injury bug. There was games where, Ivicic missed around 4 games. Trey White missed a couple games. DGL missed games. Will Riley had the flu for some games. Kasper Giacochonis had a left forearm injury. Illinois before that injury bug in January, they were a 12-3 team, top 10 KenPom. That's an advanced analytic. They were a Final Four contender. But you saw when all those injuries piled up, that's when the losses piled up. If they were fully healthy, they're not losing to USC. They're not losing to Rutgers. They're not losing to Nebraska. So you hope that next year, if they're a little bit healthier, they can build that continuity. And even if they're not maybe going to be as talented up to bottom to top, you're going to see more consistency. Like Ivisic, he would lose 12 pounds and have to regain it with eating a bunch of chicken Alfredo within a couple days. You saw Boswell kind of struggle with what his role was. But you saw at the end of the season, Boswell got more comfortable. 17 points per game over his last 10 games, better shot selection. You saw guys like, Ivisic really pop a lot of three-point shots. You saw Jake Davis get a little more aggressive. This Illinois basketball team, a lot of moving pieces. I think they'll make the NCAA tournament next year, but they're going to have to attack in this transfer portal. And luckily, they have till late May or, June, July to really finalize a good Big Ten roster. Because right now, I do think Purdue is probably going to be better than Illinois. They bring back two really good guards with Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith. That's in Trey Ren Kaufman, who's a really good center. I think Michigan's got a really good front court. They reloaded, and bringing in Mraz Johnson's a big plus. We'll see what's going on with Michigan State. I know they lost Trey Holloman, but Illinois is probably around a top 6 Big Ten team. And if they stay healthy, I think that's a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that makes your path to make a Sweet 16 a lot more manageable. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I'm Carson Gordy.
Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to watch more videos from News Channel 20.